Hello, I'm Neil from Vodafone Business and I'm the head of the energy sector. I'm here with my colleague Emma, the head of innovation, and Matt, who's the Chief Information Officer for UK Power Networks. In this session, we're going to be talking about the importance of data, how it drives insights, and how it's being used to power the energy industry. So Emma, Matt, deriving more intelligent insights will become more efficient through data-driven insights and data-driven information. What does that really mean?
Organisations traditionally operated on tacit knowledge, people's experience, individual expertise, and just, doing things the way they're always done to some extent. Being data-driven and insight-driven is about what's actually happening, using measurement insights that are based on the transfer of data from a physical asset, in our instance, to a central point where you use the insight, the analysis, the visualizations of what's actually happening to inform what you're doing, rather than it being based on, I expect that's going to happen, or I know in a certain period I can anticipate X, Y, or Z. So it's actually using certainties and known measurement and insight to inform what you're doing, or to at least validate your decisions.
Absolutely evidence-based, removing bias out of decision-making and previous exposures to the situation. You're absolutely right. But I think it's about moving from being reactive into proactive, and then ideally into where we want to be predictive maintenance. But of course, you're using data already across your smart grid and energy. So is it just a simple case of just automating the way in which you capture data, or is there a lot more involved?
There's a maturity curve, I think is the best way of putting it. So the traditional operating models that still exist, inspection and maintenance activities have always happened. And you inspect to a certain extent to, yes, look at, say, the physical condition of something, but also to collate data. So the digitalization of that is removing the need for the human component in gaining that insight, gathering that data. But clearly it also unlocks the opportunity for far greater, far more sophisticated, more granular insight than we ever had before.
We talked earlier about generative AI, and of course, one of the things with generative AI, it's creating things for the first time. Because in many ways, we've used AI for many years.
Yeah.
So how do you see that within a sort of a C&I environment, in an environment where human safety is key? Do you see a contrast or difficulty between human and machine making decisions? How do you see that playing out?
There's challenges, but I think it's being aware of what the limitations are and an appropriate use, especially when it comes to generative AI. Obviously, there's a huge amount of hype around the potential impacts and implications, both positive and negative, around generative AI. And the strategy that we're adopting is to make sure we're fully exploring that, but in a controlled manner, so that we understand the risks and we don't expose ourselves by being too bold and moving too far too quickly. So what I mean by that is there are certain use cases for generative AI which are high value, low risk. So let's start there effectively. Let's cut our teeth on something that we know is going to be beneficial, but it's not going to expose us to potential downsides. Because with generative AI, it's that fact that the output, the product, may be plausible, but not necessarily correct. And it comes down to what's the quality of the base data that it's feeding from.
Matt, quite a few of the conversations I have with CIOs of energy companies are around the convergence or divergence of OT and IT. Perhaps you could just explain briefly what OT and IT are and what you see as the benefits or challenges of convergence or diverging them.
Yeah, so for me, it's about convergence. If you have divergence of the two, then there's a problem. They are synonymous. And I think that's why it's difficult to try and describe them in salient terms, because if you imagine it as a Venn diagram, those two circles are becoming increasingly converged and overlapping. And rightly so. Ultimately, operational technology is about, as I say, visibility and control and optimization. The intelligence to do that well, it necessitates the IT, the ability to transport the data, to integrate the data, to store it, to analyze it, to put it to work, and use intelligent applications to leverage it in all the ways that we're becoming increasingly familiar with.
And I think as from a telecommunication side, so we see organizations that want difference or separation between OT and IT, also having a very technology-based influence as well. So very traditionally, we see in the OT environment very established, very traditional, very safe, very high availability technologies. Whereas we've increasingly seen over the last 36 months, energy providers taking a much more dynamic cloudification style approach on the IT side and using much more emerging software-defined AI type technologies. Now, the two are different, but they can be the same. Are there sort of similar challenges that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is semantics and terminology, because there's a difference between divergence and segregation. They are interdependent. They're symbiotic. You can't have OT and IT completely separate from one another. It just doesn't work like that. So I can understand why you need to have that delineation, those firewalls, if you like, and those controls, and for them to be managed and operated and controlled and coordinated differently. But part of that is, how do you make the two work together? Because if you focus purely on operational technology, for instance, you're not going to get the full benefits and insight and control and outcomes that you want if you've not got the IT, the information technologies that underpin and facilitate the enablement of what OT is there for.
So Matt, could you give us a few examples of how you're actually using data to improve your customers' experience?
Yeah, so in a storm scenario in particular, but any time of high incoming call volume, clearly the time to respond and being able to handle that volume of calls is critical. So we've invested heavily in increasing the insight and intelligence and automation around those incoming calls, so that we can identify location, proactively push out SMS messages to notify customers en masse, irrespective of whether they're called in or not. If they're registered on a system and associated with an area, we can inform them that we're aware, we are responding, and then off the back of that, provide regular updates on our response, target restoration, right the way through to close out.